Hello, it's nice to see you again in the How Do I series for Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2013. My name is Vyakoslav Babic. I'm a NAV MVP and a certified trainer delivering trainings for Platan. Today I'll show you how to integrate NAV 2013 with Yammer. At the end of today's video, I'll have a simple customization that allows my NAV 2013 to exchange contextual information with Yammer. I'll be able to see Yammer messages in NAV, and I will also be able to update Yammer directly from NAV. For example, by creating a new customer and changing a phone number, I will update Yammer with exactly the same information. How do external applications communicate with Yammer? As documented on Yammer developer's website, there are several APIs that third-party applications can call to interact with Yammer. For my demo to date, I've chosen the RESTful API because of its simplicity and straightforwardness. This API allows you to call different functionality in Yammer and read and manipulate data in your Yammer network. Yammer's API supports both JSON and XML. JSON is more appropriate for web applications, while XML is more appropriate for other application types. In the course of this video, I'll show a simple NAV customization, which includes customizing NAV functionality and user interface to seamlessly integrate NAV and Yammer data to form a unified user experience. I'll do this in 4 steps. In the first step, I'll customize the data model to keep Yammer data in NAV. I won't develop all from scratch, and I'll start with a set of prepared objects. First, in the user setup table, I've added a field to represent the user's authentication token. It's a prerequisite for users to be authenticated with Yammer before they can talk to its REST API. I will not explain in this video how this token is obtained, as there is an extensive documentation on Yammer's developer side that explains this concept. The Yammer user table contains the IDs and names of Yammer users. The ID is the most important piece of information, as it is used to relate messages to users. The Yammer message table contains the information about messages in Yammer. We store them locally because Yammer only allows polling for new messages every 60 seconds. Caching messages locally reduces the amount of server requests. For each message, we also store the relation to customer and sales order. Our message caching routine parses the message to see if it contains information about a customer or a sales order. For example, Annette Hill wants to post a new message into Yammer and relate it to customer number 40,000. We'll see this message in NAV shortly. The Yammer setup table only stores information about the last polling time. NAV will not poll Yammer for new messages again unless at least 60 seconds have elapsed since the time indicated here. Now that we've seen the tables, let's create and customize the code units. Let's take a look at Yammer Management Code Unit. It contains functions that communicate with Yammer and some helper functions to make coding easier. An important function, getResponse, is a generic function that retrieves any kind of list from Yammer. It receives a URL that represents a REST endpoint, extends it using the user's authentication token, appends optional parameters, and then simply loads the response into an XML document. Then it returns the nodes specified by a specific XPath expression. There are 2 specific functions that call the getResponse function. The populate users function loads the list of users from Yammer into the Yammer user table. It passes the URL to Yammer's user's REST endpoint and uses the response XPath expression to select all users from the XML formatted response message. Then it deletes the contents of the Yammer user table and repopulates them again from the XML nodes list. The onRun trigger calls this function. This allows for the if code unit run construct. The getMessages function loads the messages from Yammer and stores them locally in the Yammer message table. It first checks if more than 60 seconds have elapsed since the last time messages were polled. Then it tries to retrieve the last message to check its ID. The newer than parameter of the message REST endpoint specifies that only messages newer than the specified ID are retrieved. Then the function iterates through all messages and stores them in the local table. Finally, it parses the message for the customer ID and the sales order ID using the match helper function. This function uses a regular expression to parse the message body, looking for a specific tag keyword. In the end, the getMessages function updates the Yammer setup table with the current date and time to prevent polling for messages in the next 60 seconds. Finally, I have modified the login management code unit to call the if code unit run construct on the Yammer management code unit. This in turn calls the populate users function and does not make any fuss if for whatever reason the Yammer call fails. Good. We have tables and business logic that integrate data from Yammer into NAV. Let's now create some UI to show and manipulate the data in Yammer. I want my Yammer messages to show up in my role center, so I'll create a new fact box page for this. I'll use the Yammer message table and I'll create a page of list part type. Then I'm going to add some fields to it. I do not want to show the sender ID, so I'm going to show the name, so I have to declare a variable for Yammer user table. And then in the on after get record trigger, I'm going to make sure to load the correct user record. If I cannot load the user record, then I'm simply going to show an empty user. I'll also declare a Yammer management code unit so that from on open page trigger I can actually make sure that I call the get messages function. And here I'm just going to replace the user ID with the first and last name. I'll change the names of the controls and I'll set the page properties like caption and name and ID. And finally I'm going to save this page. My next step is going to be to add this fact box to the role center. So I'm designing my role center and here I'm just going to add a new part and I'm going to set the properties that it shows my Yammer messages fact box part. And I'm simply going to save this page and close it. Then I'm going to try it in my RoleTailor client. Here I can see that my user account is not authenticated with Yammer. So this is because I didn't set up the token yet. So I'm going to find my user setup table and then I'm simply going to paste my authentication token that I've prepared earlier. If I try to run this page again, then I can see that basically the messages are now listed here. I'm going to remove unnecessary fact boxes. My next step is going to be to add this fact box to the customer list and customer card pages. So I'm just going to copy it from my role center and then I'm going to look for customer card, design it, paste it here, and then I'm just going to unindent it and then I'm going to set the properties to link it. I want to only show those messages that pertain to a specific customer. So I'm making this link here. Then I'm going to copy this part so I can simply paste it back into the customer list page. Good. So after I've modified my customer card and customer list, I can click on customers and make sure that on each customer I actually see a specific list of messages that pertain to that specific customer. At this stage we can show data from Yammer in NAV. Our next step will be to make NAV post new messages into Yammer. For that we're going to customize a couple of objects. We are going to start with the Yammer management code unit. In this code unit I'm going to add a couple of more functions. The first function is going to be called post message, and that function will call the request function. This request function is a generic function which I'm going to use to post any kind of messages or call any kind of requests from Yammer. It's going to receive 3 parameters and I'm going to declare a .NET variable of type system.net.http web request. Here I'm writing the code which calls web request. I'm passing the URL which is authenticated and I append the parameters. It's a very simple function. In the post message function I'm going to call the request function. I'm going to receive the body parameter which represents the body of the message. I have to translate that body of the message into a web acceptable string of characters for which I need the system.uri variable. Here I'm calling the post method on the URL for messages. I'm specifying the body Every time I post a new message, I want to refresh my fact box. So for that, I'm going to call the getMessages function immediately after I post a new one. However, since I do not want to apply my 60-second rule, I'm going to add a new parameter which is called forceUpdate. And when I call getMessages with true, it will simply override the 60-second rule. There is one more place in the code that I need to update. It's in my Yammer messages fact box. Here I must make sure that I also specify the parameter. Here it's going to be false, so I'm not forcing the update. Let me call this function now. From table customer, I'm going to call the post message function every time I create a new customer. So I'm declaring the Yammer management code unit variable, and in the onInsert trigger, I'm simply adding the code to call the Yammer management code unit with post message. I'm adding a tag for the customer number and saying that the customer has just been created. Also, I want to update Yammer every time that I change the phone number or an email address for a customer. So I'm also adding appropriate code into the onModify trigger. So here, if the phone number is changed, I'm again adding a message with the customer tag and saying that there is a new phone number for this customer. And also if the email has changed, I'm specifying that for this customer tag, the new email address is available. I'm now going to test this in role-tailored client. So here a NetHill is asking if somebody knows the email address for this customer. So I'm going to locate this customer. It's 40,000, and I'm simply going to edit the email address field for this customer. So here I'm changing a part of email address, and I'm simply going to click OK. And immediately the message will appear in my Yammer messages list. And if I check my Yammer web page, I can also see that I have one new message. If I open it, I can see that my user account has added a new message which says that the customer has a new email address. Now I'm going to add a new page which is going to be of standard dialog type, which I'm going to use to allow users to post just random messages from either the role center or a specific customer. So I'm going to have one simple function which is going to be called getBody, which is returning the value of the body global variable. This body variable is going to be bound to a message control, and the getBody function is going to be used to send it back to the caller. So it's a very simple page. I'm saving it as new Yammer message. Then I'm going to call it from an action in the Yammer messages fact box page. So I'm going to add a new action which is going to be called new message, and here I'm going to add a new function called new message. On the action I'm going to define the image property. I'm just going to use the comment image. I'm going to promote it, and then I'm going to call the new message function from this action. Here in the new message function I'm going to call the Yammer post message page. I'm going to run it modally, and if the user clicks OK, I'm going to get the value of the body from this page into the body variable, and then I'm going to filter on the current customer number, and if I have a filter I'm going to add a tag to current customer number. If I'm calling this page from the customer card or list, then I'm just going to add the customer hashtag automatically. Let me try this. Here in the role center I'm just trying a random new message which is unrelated to any customer. So I post this. It's available immediately, and then I'm going back to customers, and here I'm going to add a new message which says like, actually I'm not sure if this email works either, and then I'm just going to click OK, and the new message appears which is related to this specific customer. And this completes our Yammer integration demo. To wrap it up, to integrate third-party applications with Yammer, such as NAV 2013 customizations, you call Yammer's RESTful API. It allows you to retrieve data from and post data to Yammer. To be able to interact with Yammer, each user has to authenticate using the OAuth authentication process. At the end of this process, the user receives an authentication token, which can be subsequently used to call Yammer API. The easiest way to communicate with Yammer from NAV is using .NET interoperability. Reading data from Yammer only requires you to use the XML document class, while posting data to Yammer requires the HTTP web request class. Yammer API is well documented, and in this short demo I have only shown a couple of simple integration scenarios. Thanks for watching this video, and I'm looking forward to presenting for you again in the How Do I series for Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2013.